I'd like to invite our guests to come and have a seat. So before we get started, the Once and Future Bend in February 5th, we partnered with a company called Hubble Communications, and what it's going to be about is a survey on community values as it relates to growth in Bend. And we're going to share the survey results. We're going to have a panel digest it and talk about and discuss it, and how do we apply what we're learning about how people feel about growth in Bend toward policy development and some of the decisions that we're making here locally. So that will be a really, really interesting conversation, and I welcome you folks to invite you to come and join us for that. So we are here tonight, the minors and the supers. We have two freshman representatives with us and a sitting senator who is, we're so thrilled to have somebody with a lot of background and tenure in the Senate. And I'm going to introduce them really quickly and invite them to talk a little bit about who they are, what they're doing, what committees they serve on, that sort of thing. So Helt, Representative Cheri Helt, is our new sitting representative from House District 54. Everybody welcome her. Representative Jack Zika, House District 53, our freshman senator, representative. And Senator Tim Knopp from District 27. So tonight, before I let them go ahead and chat a little bit about their committees and their backgrounds, just so we're all on the same page, tonight we're going to talk a little bit about the 2019 session. We're going to talk about what it is like to walk in with two freshman representatives, to also be Republicans in a supermajority of Democrats, and how to position our community in a way that will be productive both short and long term, and talk a lot about some of the legislation that's already in play and what will be in play. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and Senator, I'm going to start with you. If you could chat a little bit about anything you want to share about your background, and please share with us the committees that you're going to be serving on this year.
Katie, how long you want us to go?
We got an hour, but keep it less than that.
All right, I'm going to go quick then. Well, I'm a native Oregonian. I was born in Portland, and been in Bend just over about 40 years now. So it's really an honor to serve you in the Oregon legislature. I think I'm starting my 13th year of doing this, and I am on more committees than I think any other legislator. I'm not quite sure how that happened, but I was trying to look them up on the internet because I'm not sure I can remember them all, but I'm going to try. So I'm serving on the Healthcare Committee, serving on the Housing Committee, serving on the Human Services Committee. I'm serving on the Joint Committee on Student Success. I'm serving on the Committee on Capital Culture. I'm serving on the Campaign Finance Committee. I'm serving on the Workforce Committee. And finally, a committee that I hope never has to meet, the Committee on Conduct. So that is where complaints go for behavioral problems. So it has only met a couple times in the last few years, so I'm hoping that that is a committee that doesn't meet. But all the big topics are going to go through one of the committees I'm on, because I'm pretty much on almost all of them. So education and education funding, cost containment, and accountability are all going to go through the Joint Student Success Committee. And then and the Workforce Committee typically deals with PERS. So that's going to be a pretty big issue if the majority party decides we're going to take that up. And I've got a long list of bills that constituents have approached me about that I have put in to the system. And so you can look those up on a system called OLIS. It's the Oregon Legislative Information System. It's a pretty snazzy deal. congratulations, that is your tax dollars at work. So if you sign on to that, you can look up all the bills and who's sponsoring what and learn all the information about all your legislators and even those that aren't your legislators. So real important bill, Kaylee's Law, going to be a really important bill this year, and that is a law to help campus security. And it essentially says that you can be a police officer and have a police force, or you can be a campus security officer, but if you are a campus security officer, you cannot play police officer. And as you likely know, we had an incident where Kaylee Sawyer was raped and murdered by an employee of COCC. And we are going to try to make sure that that opportunity for someone to do that sort of evil never happens again, and honor Kaylee through this process. So lots of important bills, but I'm going to leave as much time as possible for my new colleagues, and I welcome them to the effort.
Representative Zika.
Hi, yeah, thank you for everybody coming out. This is pretty amazing. This is my first town hall now, so I'm enjoying this. But I live in Redmond, and I was on the Planning Commission for the City of Redmond, and I'm a realtor and on the Board of Directors for the Oregon Association of Realtors, so I'm very passionate about housing. So when I was choosing my committees or asking for my committees, I asked for Human Services and Housing, and that was the first one that I got, so I was very happy to get that. I'm also going to be on Energy and Environment, and as well as Veterans and Emergency Preparedness. So only 3 committees, not the boatload that Tim has here. So hopefully a manageable a lot. But so yeah, I'm very excited to get in there. Trying to figure out the building and how things work and make sure I make all the deadlines, because I did have some bills that I put through, or a legislative request that hopefully will be turning into bills. Affordable housing, we had a pilot project in Bend that they got awarded, but the only other city to apply was Redmond. So we're trying to do a fix on that so we can hopefully get Redmond to get included with some affordable housing. But I think it's mainly, just getting our foot in the door with some local control of our land use laws, so we can start to, every city in Oregon can start to do affordable housing, because this isn't just a Central Oregon need. I mean, we really need it, but every city across the state has been needing affordable housing. So this is a good way to do that for local control. Also trying to do more of a long-term fix for our homelessness. As it stands right now, our nonprofits can take funds from the state, but they have to use them by the time the session ends for the legislation session, for fear that it can get taken away. So the only plans that we can do are short-term plans, mostly like rental vouchers. So if we can create an account or create some way or a vehicle that these nonprofits can hold on to some money just for 5 years or whatever that may be, that they could start planning for more long-term solutions. More, the neighbor impact planned on building 3 homeless shelters, but they couldn't. So that was one of the reasons why they could not do it. So hopefully we can get some help there and try to help out our homelessness population. Also, a bill that I'm trying to introduce would be for our police force. We're spending about a quarter of our police force resources on our big box retail for petty theft. So it's pretty amazing how much time and money is spent just going to Walmart to try to apprehend these people. As it stands right now, Walmart has to call the police at $20 and above for petty theft. So they're there a lot. And if we were to raise it just up to $100 and above, that would reduce it by 40%. So we have a lot of money crunches when it comes to our police force, and we would like to hire more police officers. And so I think their time is very important, and I think that would be a great way to have them reduce that. I got other things too. One of it is an auto theft, making the burden of proof easier. Another one's for ladder fuel reductions. PERS during I'm trying to not take all your time up here, but PERS, that's a huge monster. So there's a cap at 100,000 for top earners. Also, with Tim, we're doing signed on his bill on that for averaging from 3 years at your end of your retirement to 5 years, so that would be your payment. So, and with Cheri, we're doing a daycare bill. So there's a lot of moving pieces, and we're doing a lot of different things. So I'm happy to tell you more. But
So I have a follow-up question. Where is your office?
It's,
Did you get it
yes,
assigned?
I did.
Good.
I got the last office because I am a freshman, and my last name is Zika, so they did it in alphabetical, and they didn't put me on the roof. I was worried but no, so I got the last available office, and I'm at room 387, so feel free to come and say hi anytime.
Great. Thank you. Representative Helt.
Hi, I'm Cheri Helt, and it's so nice to be here, and I'm so honored to have to be your newly elected representative. I have a lot of important jobs. First, I'm a mom. I have a 19-year-old, a 17-year-old, and an 8-year-old, and I'm a wife of 26 years. And I've been on the school board for the last 8 years, and so that's what drove me to run for this position. And I was very honored with my committee assignments. I get to be the co-vice chair of the Education Committee, and I'm also on the Joint Chief Student Success Committee with Tim, and I will be on the Human Services and Housing Committee with Jack. So I'm excited to be able to serve with other Central Oregon legislators on my committees, and I'm really excited to bring some change towards education. We all know that our graduation rates are 48th in the nation, and we need some real change and reform, and I'm excited to be part of those. Can you not hear me? I'm excited to be part of those conversations. And I have a bunch of bills that I've put forward. There's one on search and rescue, to overhaul search and rescue and figure out how to make it more effective. There's a bill that I signed on for that, a legislative concept. They're not actually bills yet, right? And
They actually, some of them are bills now, Cheri.
oh, they are.
They have bill numbers. Some of them do.
Oh, and that one does have a bill number then.
Yeah,
So it's a bill.
that's a bill.
Okay, I didn't
Yeah.
misspeak. I'm learning all this new stuff. And then a mental health bill. I'd like to see us have a mental health goal as a community so that all of our agencies are working together. We have a lot of people that are serving a lot of mental health needs, like our police departments, our fire departments, our hospitals, our schools, our Veterans Association. And there's no, our counties, and there's no format for them to work together and actually have a goal together and move things forward. And so I've been meeting with a lot of constituents. One thing that I will tell you about myself is I am not an expert in very many things, and so I will surround myself with experts and seek out community members to make sure that I'm doing things that are going to move things for good instead of for harm. Because how many times have we all had an idea that we think is great, and then we figure out that that wasn't really the greatest idea. I met with Lisa Doby there about this mental health bill, and she seemed to give her stamp of approval, so that was good. I also met with the CCOs, and I've been working very hard before I get there to meet with as many community members as I have and as I can. And so, like Tim said, to bring bills forward that are constituent-driven, not just from myself-driven. And so, I also have a bill, because it has a number, to fully fund education, and that is with Senator Knopp as well. And I think Representative Zika also signed on to that as well. So I'm just really looking forward to the changes that we can make and the changes that we can bring, and having a good, solid voice for Central Oregon.
Thanks to each of you. I want to take a brief station identification break because I forgot to thank our sponsors at the very beginning. But our What's Brewing sponsors, again this year, are SunWest and Miller Lumber and the Miller family. Just wanted to give a big shout out to those folks who have been a large part of bringing these key issues to our community. So one of the kickoff question here that I'd like you folks to address, we've all been reading in the bulletin, we've all been looking at the news in the last few weeks as we're getting ready for the starting gun, is that there are some things in play already that have generated a lot of discussion out there. So some examples: taxes, new taxes, lots and lots of new taxes. Some affecting businesses, especially small businesses, which is near and dear to the Chamber's heart. Some of it looks like a potential business property tax increase of 40%, House Bill 2165. Let's see. And S-Corp's minimum tax from $150 to $1,000, especially for very small businesses, very impactful. I could go on. Kicker tax, talk about keeping that for a rainy day fund. And also issues around housing, rent control, incentivizing affordable housing, zoning changes that allows for mixed use or for multiple houses on standard residential. So there's a lot in play. Perhaps we can start with the biggest issue, and if you folks could give us your out of the gate initial perspectives on all of these new business taxes that you hear about coming down the line. What are your perspectives? And Senator Knopp, I'm looking at you because you're the guy that's been around this block a few times. But any perspectives any of you want to add to that? Because I know we've all been tracking that quite a bit. If you could comment on that going into this session.
Sure. Thanks, Katie. Yeah, there's always aggressive agenda by the Portland Liberals to put as many taxes as they can into the legislative process, and they typically do about the same, roughly 50 different taxes, from raising property taxes, raising the corporate minimum, beer and wine, cigarette taxes, all kinds of taxes and fees. Most of them end up dying of their own natural weight, where even members of the Democratic caucus can't quite bring themselves to vote for them. And of course, as we know, constitutionally, all tax increases start in the House. And so I typically never see most of those because I'm in the Senate. However, they do like to have votes from time to time in the House on these particular items. And so I think that really the only way a tax reform type package moves is if it reduces taxes on some, likely on small business owners, and raises taxes on others, likely larger corporations. It tends to be where the majority likes to go. But I think it's unlikely that that would move forward without a significant effort to deal with our structural spending and have some reform there, because we have a spending problem in Oregon. We have record revenues, never before seen in Oregon. So if you have record high revenue and yet you start with a deficit, which what we're told, we have a $600 million deficit with revenue at all-time highs, you don't have a revenue problem, you have a spending problem. So we need to work on that, and so I don't think they're going to likely move that forward unless they also move forward a package that involves dealing with our structural spending issues.
Representative Zika?
Yeah, I mean, for the chambers, business owners, we also have to worry about the corporate tax, and then also the gross receipts tax. They've issued that again, which the gross receipts tax we voted down as a measure. So this keeps coming back, so we have to look out and keep our eye on that. I'm already receiving emails from constituents that say, hey, look, my business is a low margin. Now, how am I going to afford to pay this additional taxes? Or I'm on a fixed income. I can't afford a higher cost of living. So I'm walking into the Capitol with them on my mind. So that's one of the last option I would ever want to make, would be to raise anybody's taxes like that. So what I would like to focus in on is the Secretary of State did an audit with our procurement, the way we purchased things at the state, and they're not at the exact same level. So across the state, we're paying different prices for our goods and services. And if we were to get that system in place and have a steady number or a standard number, we could possibly save up to $1.6 billion. That's amazing. So you talk about a budget gap for healthcare or our schools, that's a big chunk right there. So let's focus in on that and see if we can save ourselves some money first.
Yeah, so
A little bit closer.
what do I do? Can you hear me now? Okay. So there are a lot of talk of taxes. As a small business owner, we have incurred a lot of costs over the last years. We had to bring on sick leave and health care. And so there's not a lot of ways that small businesses that have small margins are able to raise their prices and bring in and generate more money. So we have to treat our government as well like we do a small business, when we were able to do those things by making sure that we're tightening up on our waste. You know, I mean, in restaurants, you make sure that you're not throwing things out. Make sure that you're juicing the full lemon instead of throwing half of it out, because you get twice the product. And so we need to find ways that we're going to save money for our state as well, and do some of the good work that we need to do. But this conversation will be driven by the majority, and so it's going to be our job to make sure that we have our voices heard and do as much as we can to help our small businesses and make sure our working families do not have costs raised tremendously on them. And that's one of my real fears, is we have a housing crisis, which is an affordability crisis, and if we talk about raising money on small businesses and on our working families, that makes me nervous. And so that's a lens that I will take and look at all of those bills through.
Senator?
Katie, as per usual, I have all my good ideas a little too late. So, so my second time around on this one, I do need to inform you that if you are a vapor, your taxes are going to get raised, because they are coming after that one for sure. That'll be early in session. And so I thought of two more. So there's this idea that corporations, they typically identify corporations like, well, I'm not going to name any names, but big box stores, okay? And they will tell you that they don't pay enough, and so because they don't pay enough, some of their employees are on public assistance, and so they're going to try to tax those businesses. The difference between kind of what they're paying and the cost of those benefits, and so it's kind of a Medicaid tax. And then if you remember, somebody came up with a brilliant idea that we should tax health insurance, which I voted against, but they're bringing it back because this was a temporary tax, so they're bringing it back. They're going to pass it again, and they're going to double it. And I think they're quite serious about doing that. And so if you have health insurance, then chances are you're going to end up having that passed on to you. And so I know those three taxes, they're going to try to go early in session, and they're going to try to jam those. And so my colleagues here are going to get first crack at those. I am likely going to be voting no. Depends on the package, but in all likelihood, from what I've seen, these kind of are reruns, a sort of tax recycling, as it were. And they're bringing these back for yet one more session, except they're bringing them back at higher rates. And until, as Representative Zika has said, until we get control of spending and waste in government, we should not be raising taxes substantially on the good citizens of Oregon.
Thank you. So before we get off this topic of taxes and revenue and costs, anybody hear the OPB section on PERS today? There is Think Out Loud show. I didn't hear it, but I've heard a lot of folks talking about it. So PERS, one of the two elephants in the room, probably the bigger elephant in the room. Let's talk just briefly about this. So the Oregon Leadership Summit and Oregon Business and Industries and essentially the business community of the state has come up with some proposals. We're looking at, devote an additional $100 million to help schools cover the costs in the governor's budget. School pension costs are slated to jump by $375 million to pay PERS, and that's just the schools. So this has been a discussion in the business community for quite a while, and there are lots of different perspectives and opinions on whether or not we're going to address it this term. But so the Oregon Business Group is suggesting a few things, and I'd love to get your reactions to these three suggestions. One is for employee cost sharing. So that makes, it says basically the public employees need to make their own contribution to their pensions, making the state an outlier. The second opportunity, well, I guess proposal is a better word for it, is to give employees the choice of a pension plan or expanded defined contribution plan, but not both. Currently, they get both of those options. And The third proposal they're making to the legislature to solve PERS is the working retirement payback plan, which basically says you can retire, and it essentially keeps the double dipping to help pay down your PERS by allowing you to retire, if I understand this properly, earlier, and it helps pay down the long-term debt of the PERS that the state owes you as an employee. So those are three ideas from the business community. It's a huge looming, I hear it's what, 23 billion now deficit? Is that low, or is it about right?
22.
Okay. So we've had some proposals. This is one of those sticky issues that comes back to us every session. I don't know what the answer is, and it has a long, complicated history that we don't need to get into in the detail right now. But what is your perspective on some of those proposals? Do you think that we're going to get to some sort of level of PERS reform? Go ahead, Cheri.
Well, I've been on the school board for the last 8 years, and so that puts me at advocating for PERS reform just slightly less than Senator Knopp. We do have a huge deficit, and it's over $22 billion. It's 22 to 26, depending on which publication you read or believe, and that's a $4 billion difference. So that's a huge difference in and of itself. I believe it's our responsibility to address this because we have people that are counting on this system, and it's becoming less and less stable. It's 69% funded at this time, and so what that means is that the PERS board can choose to double collar our payments for school districts and cities and counties. And so we could actually have to pay twice as much as we're paying today, because right now we're on a single collar. And on my 8 years on the school board, we have constantly had to cut $5 million from our budget on a yearly basis because of PERS rate increases due to the rates of the PERS liability, unfunded actuarial liability rising. So it is a real problem, and if we want to address our deficits, we have to address our deficits. And I think we need the courage to do so and to make sure that we make a sustainable system and make one that is workable for our cities, our counties, and especially our school districts. And if we choose not to, I think that's a disservice to our entire state.
Yeah, well, of course, I'm all for PERS reform. The last biennium, the payments went up 40%, so we had to lay off teachers. We already had a tight crunch with our emergency services, because they're also paying it, and our counties and our cities are paying it, so their costs go up, so permit prices go up, so that adds on to the affordable housing, so making houses unaffordable by doing that too. So we have to do that because it's going to go up, the payment's going to go up another 40%, so that's more teachers and that's more police officers, it's more positions that either have to be laid off or services that have to be cut. So this is something that, yes, we do need to do, and we need to do it quick. And the employment contribution plan is a great idea. I think we should go forward with that personally.
Senator?
I like the ideas that they have put forward. I have several bills that I've drafted that are similar, and several bills that I've drafted in the past I have had redrafted. And I lost count of how many PERS bills I actually have in the system now, but I was going through them today, and I think I saw at least 6 or 7, and I know I've got more. And so I am very hopeful that either the Joint Student Success Committee or the Workforce Committee, both of which I serve on, will take up this issue and will make it part of the cost containment and structural spending reform, because it needs to happen. And the problem is only going to get worse, and the longer we put it off, the worse it's going to be, and the more painful it's going to be. And we have a lot of opportunity out there. So I again remain optimistic that we will get this. And I will just tell you, my optimism stems from a time when we were 100% funded in PERS, and that happened after the 2003 reforms, which I was involved with. So by about 2007, we, for a brief moment, were fully funded, and then you know what happened in the stock market. And we were then not fully funded and haven't been ever since. And as the good representative said, we're just under 70% funded today. And the stock market is not performing particularly well. It had a pretty bad fourth quarter. If you guys got your 401k statements like I did, didn't turn out so well in the fourth quarter. It was painful. So I am optimistic that there are quite a few Democrats who understand that there needs to be reform. And I think we can get almost anything PERS related through the Senate. I think it's going to be very difficult for the House because the numbers are so tilted there. But again, I remain optimistic that they understand the problem and that they're going to work with us on a solution.
Thank you. So want to switch to the topic now as we go into the legislative session on housing. At the Chamber, we talk a lot about this because it has to do with workforce, it has to do with equity, it has to do with the whether or not you thrive as a business in this community if you folks have a place to live. So there's a lot of talk around several pieces of legislation, but I want to start with rent control. And I'm just going to leave it at that, and I would love to have your perspective of how you feel about rent control, how you feel about the legislation that, or at least the concept that's being floated right now.
Well, I'm like I said, passionate about housing, and rent control, it just doesn't work. It's been tried in other cities like San Francisco and New York, and they're actually starting to back away from it now. What rent control does is you put regulations and you tell landlords that, hey, you can't raise your rent by a certain amount or you can't raise your rent at all. It's frozen. So what happens are these landlords either sell their properties or they just let them turn into slums because they're not making any more money on it, so they can't put any more money in to fix them up. So you reduce the quantity and then you also reduce the quality of rentals. So I'm against rent control, absolutely.
I believe there's a supply and demand issue, and we should address that. And so I have a legislative concept that directs the state to sell all the land that they have that is available inside the UGB, that is shovel ready, that is not earmarked for another municipal project. And it's geared also towards a maximum density housing. And so that is in legislative concept. And I think that's how we address our affordable housing, is we get more housing into the system that is affordable.
Senator?
Yeah, I mean, rent control, as the good representative said, has been tried, and it has not had positive effects in San Francisco or New York, which are the two most expensive markets in the country. And if you do not match the supply or increase the supply, and we continue to have significant demand of people wanting to move to Central Oregon, we are going to continue to have difficulty. And so we need relief from the state to allow our cities to create the supply that's necessary. And we're behind. And part of the reason we're behind is because of the recession. There wasn't a lot built. And at the peak, in about 2007, there was about 2,000 units being built in the city of Bend. At the trough of the recession, it went to 150. And it stayed at that level for 2 to 3 years and then started to creep back up slowly and then kind of took off in about 2013. And so we got behind on the number of units that we really needed, because even though we were having a horrible recession here, we were still growing. We just weren't growing at 7%. We were growing at more like 1%. But we were still growing. And so we still need units. And if you don't fix that problem, you're not gonna put a dent in it. I mean, I think it will make people feel good to know that their rent can't go up more than 5% or 7% or whatever. But the problem is there's a lot of landlords are going to get out of the business, and they're going to sell those, and those units are going to flip into owner-occupieds. And so it's going to make the problem actually a whole lot worse. And so while well-intended, I think, by those who are proposing it, I think it lacks the track record of actually solving a problem.
Thank you. Is there any other, there's been a lot of discussion about affordable housing and just increase in stock in general. Anything that you see, Senator, coming into this session that has some promise on that?
Well, I like the bill that Jack and I have for Redmond that hopefully will be helpful there. There's the speaker does have a housing package, and I think there are some good things in that package. My concern, though, is that it may end up getting coupled with this rent control issue, and that could create some problems. But there has been a lack of interest on the other side in addressing the supply and demand problem. I was told by a legislator who testified that, in fact, that is not a problem. And I don't know if some people maybe don't understand, but you don't get to suspend the rule of supply and demand. It kind of works itself out anyway. And so just saying that's not a problem isn't a solution. You know, it's kind of like presenting alternative facts. And so we continue to have an issue here in Central Oregon, and so we need to try to resolve that as best we can locally. And actually, a lot of the things that the city of Bend has done are proposals for statewide. And so you could say we're at the forefront of it. The problem for us is that we just have more growth than everybody else. And so it's really hard to keep your head above water when kind of the water is rushing in with all those people wanting to come here. And so we're catching up with apartment units and so on. And you may have read in the newspaper that it's kind of a little hard to get those projects going in certain areas. And so what we really need is a lot of thinking like what has happened in Bend and have that statewide, but we really do need land use reform that helps the cities be able to get the number of units that are necessary.
Thank you. Representatives, did you want to add anything to that? Okay. And a shout out to the city too. It's really interesting. They have led a lot of the strategies on addressing affordable housing, but also even in the zoning for standard residential. I mean, they already passed some policy on allowing more density on certain size lots. Now this becomes a statewide, except it's more mandatory on a statewide basis rather than optional. So shout out to the city for thinking ahead on stuff like that. We're very lucky. So I want to talk just briefly here about the Central Oregon Business Plan. There's a group of folks across the region from the business sector who have been working over the last year on trying to form a platform for the 2019 session. Some of the highlights in that platform are education, funding OSU Cascades expansion, funding COCC's Redmond campus, making sure that we have some way of accessing dollars to fund infrastructure, which is one of the major reasons why there isn't more residential development or commercial development. It's getting the pipe through the lava. It's putting in all sorts of utilities. It's getting it shovel ready. They've also talked a great deal about the workforce shortage. They've talked about housing shortage. So with this long list from Central Oregon, what are each of your perspectives in how Central Oregon can position ourselves, both from the business side, how can we help you, and from the legislative side, from your perspective, how can we position ourselves maybe for this session, but also the long term to start getting some of those monies funneled toward Central Oregon infrastructure, education, housing, et cetera. Go ahead, Representative Helt.
Well, I think it's really important that we work together and we collaborate and we continue to have that collaborative spirit that Bend and Central Oregon has, and to move things forward in that way. And I think it's really important that we have people that are willing to come to Salem to testify, to talk about what some of these things are going to do to their businesses, because low margin businesses are going to be hurt by a lot of these issues that are being brought forward. And I think we need to make sure that it's not us just, crying out that, that this is wrong, but really giving reasons why it's going to hurt businesses and some of the things that we do well together. And it's also making sure that we have a loud voice for Central Oregon and bringing investment to Central Oregon and making sure that we're talking about OSU Cascades and getting the investment brought here and making sure that those things are not forgotten. And so I think that's really important that we do those things together.
I totally agree with Representative Helt that we're going to need the business community to come help us with your expertise and help us testify at our committees when we need help to bring light of what Central Oregon needs are. It's that personal touch when you can come into town and talk in front of a hearing. It makes so much of a difference. But I'm very supportive of the COCC Redmond expansion with the $8 million ask. I got to go talk to COCC and they explained to me what they're planning on doing, and I think it'd be great for the city. Also with the OSU Cascades, their expansion too. I'd love to, when I went on the tour there, to see the expansion. I'm sure Tim knows a lot more than this than I do, but I think what we could do in Salem is actually change the rubric and how they award the money to the schools, so we don't get penalized for building new buildings or penalized for the land that we build it on. So we actually have maintenance schedules and get rewarded for that instead of penalized for doing such a great job maintaining the buildings. So these are things that we can fix and then try to get more attention for Central Oregon and more need. So.
Senator?
Yeah, I just want to thank the Chamber for their engagement over the last few years, because it's been critical to our success on things like the OSU Cascades bonds and other issues where the Chamber has worked together with our state organized chamber group and have been able to get some really good things done for Central Oregon. And so I just want to thank you for that, because there's been times in my service when it's just been totally silent, and that's been years ago. But we have really rallied in Central Oregon, and it's been important, and it's what has allowed us to have some success in Salem, because it's really difficult to get, quite frankly, anything done in today's toxic environment in the political realm. And so the fact that we were able to get through all that and do something incredibly amazing, which is get $40 million in bonds out of a total of about 80 million, so we got half of them in one session for a project that a lot of my colleagues aren't super excited about, because it kind of cuts into, or at least they view it as cutting into some of their university priorities of the other universities that already exist. But as we all know, there needs to be equity and fairness, and because of the efforts of the Chamber and a lot of you, we've been able to gain that equity and get Oregon's newest university up and going and funded, and we're building it out, probably slower than I think some would like, because I think the demand is probably pretty great in terms of what could be done. But we're going to do our best to work on the Central Oregon Business Plan with all of you. And as I tell lobbyists, I say, I need to hear from the real people. And you all are the real people, because we hear from lobbyists day in and day out, and they get paid to present a message to us. You guys do not get paid. And so when legislators see the passion behind what you're trying to accomplish, at least I take note and listen more to that than I do, and I want to know that my community supports what a paid lobbyist is asking for. And so when you guys bring groups over, it's really important. The biggest group of the year and every session that I've been in so far has been the Realtors group. Yay, Jack. But it's closely followed by the Environmental Lobby Day, where they bring some buses in, and they have some significant support for their issues as well. And beyond that, it really starts to drop off, except for when people bring up guns. That's when the people start pouring in, and the emails. We get more emails, at least I do, on guns than any other topic. So as soon as somebody brings up, it's usually gun control. There's not a lot of people pitching gun freedom these days. So when gun control is brought up, man, the computer just churns. and we'll get 5,000 emails. And it's unbelievable. And so no other issues match those kind of hot button issues. But the good news is you guys are way up there in terms of the chamber lobby day and the realtor day and some of the other groups. And so you do a really good job of representing and getting out to other legislators' offices as well. It's great for you guys to come visit us. We love to see you. But it's just as important that you're looking and meeting other legislators from other areas and getting to know their issues, because some of them don't want to meet with you if they're not from your area. And so to be able to get into leadership offices and what have you is really important in the overall success for what we want to do for a Central Oregon business plan and for OSU Cascades.
Thank you. So my next question is related to that. It has a long-term lens to it. So walking into a supermajority, how's this working in your heads? How are you thinking about going in to the situation that we have this year and leveraging yourselves in Central Oregon as minorities? And just share a few thoughts before you step foot into those doors, what you're thinking about as minors in the supers. Representative Helt.
So the session really starts before you think it starts. Legislative days in December were the real kickoff of the session. You have to have in your legislative concepts then. You don't get staff until January 14th, but you have to have your concepts in by December 22nd. So it was a very interesting dynamic for me to walk into the building and think, if I'm going to be successful, I need to be in the building before I thought I was supposed to be in the building, and not have anyone help me get the stuff done that I need to. So Representative Nubular was very helpful. He let me have his staff for the week so that I was able to write down my legislative concepts and get those in. So thanks to Newt for that. But the one thing that I want to say is my experience with the real political world really is from the outside, and also watching on the news media and reading about it. And that media is so polarized in the way it's delivered to us that I felt very much like I walked in to a much more welcoming environment than I ever thought I would. I brought concepts to representatives from both sides of the aisle, and everyone that I brought to anybody, they signed on to. And so I felt really good about the fact that there was a lot of collaboration, a lot of bipartisanship, and I really felt better than I thought that I would about that, and I thought I was more productive. And I do have a lot of things that have come out of that already to be proposed on to the committees. And so I'm really excited about the fact that I think we can get as much done as we have the passion and energy for, and I believe there's a lot more of a bipartisan spirit than is being written about or talked about. And so I'm hoping that that continues through the session. I'm not naive to think that there's not a lot of contentious issues at this moment, so maybe that's part of the reason that it's so positive. But I'm hoping that spirit keeps up, and I'm excited to work across the aisle and accomplish things, and that's what I've been finding that people are willing to do.
Yeah, when I got elected, that was one of the first questions everybody asks you is, how are you going to get in there being in the super minority? So it's very forefront of your mind when you're walking into the Capitol. So during legislative days, I made sure to make appointments with on the other side of the aisle. So I met with a bunch of the representatives over there and discussed what my priorities were, what theirs were. And I tried to choose a lot of bipartisan or nonpartisan issues, like our forest management. So we don't have another Paradise, California, and that's very important. We have to protect our cities. And both sides understand that. Daycare. We all, well, not all, but most of us need affordable daycare. That's an issue that everybody can understand. Housing, affordable housing. Everybody, every city needs affordable housing. So these were the homelessness. So these are all issues that are nonpartisan that we can get bipartisan support. So I was walking in there thinking, okay, how can we come together? What can we agree on? these are issues that I need to focus on. I need to really help the community, help Central Oregon. That's what I wanted to do. So hopefully that'll transcend, and we'll have some good bills come through and get some good things accomplished anyway. So that's my take on it.
Senator?
All business is about one thing. What is that? Relationships. And in order to get something done, it has to be good for two people. And so really, the legislature is about relationships. And so I've made a conscious effort to spend a lot of time relationship building with my colleagues across the aisle. And that is always a benefit. So you can never go wrong in building those relationships, because you never know when somebody is going to like something that you're doing. Kaylee's Law is being chief sponsored by Floyd Przanski from Eugene, Democrat, hardcore liberal Democrat, and Jeff Barker, Democrat, Jennifer Williamson, Democrat, and they're interested in that bill. And we'll get more Republicans on it as we, move forward with it. But in order to get that bill to go, it's going to have to go through committees where Democrats control the entire process. And so if you don't have good relationships with people, it's going to be hard to get anything done. And lots of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle just like to pull the pin in the grenade, throw it in the middle of the room, close the door, and see what happens. That is not a successful strategy. I was obviously talking politically speaking. And, you have a choice. You can lob grenades, or you can get something done. I chose to get something done. And therefore, we will get some things done this session. It's always challenging when the numbers are tilted against you, but we will get some good things done. I think we're going to get a great workplace harassment bill done. I think we're going to make a lot of progress on changing the culture in the Capitol as it relates to workplace harassment. We have an incredible opportunity with the negative that has happened to turn that into a positive, and I am incredibly optimistic that we're going to be able to change this for future generations. And so we're going to get some really good things done. Yeah, we're going to get some really good things done, and that's going to be all about relationships.
Great answers. Thank you. All right, one more question until I turn it over to you folks to ask your questions. Each of you now own a magic wand, and you get to wave it, and you get 3 of your bills to be passed. Which bills would they be? Who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
Okay.
My bill for world peace.
Yeah.
I think we should do it. It's at the top of the list. That's right. Yeah, so world peace, we're going to cure cancer. This is going to be good. Now, on the realistic front, I'm, as you heard, I'm really passionate about Kaylee's Law and getting that done, and I think it's important because we're going to save lives through that, and so I really like that aspect about it. I really want to see a deal on education and making progress on that, and that's really not one bill, it's like multiple bills, so I'm going to cheat, and we're just going to put a bunch of stuff in that one little pot there. So it's PERS reform, cost containment, education policy, tax reform. So I know I'm stretching it.
And you have big ones.
And so my third one.
Tim's doing the Christmas tree bill over here.
Exactly.
Shove them all in.
Well, I've been around, so I know how this process works. And and then probably the third one, I don't know. I would say I've got.
The third one?
I've got some. This is how this works, Cheri. This is how you kind of stretch it. I've got so many bills on my list, but I would say I've been working on this bill for a long time, and it's actually a privacy bill. And if I'm going to assume that we're going to get the bonds for OSU Cascade, so that's not really a bill. But this privacy bill has to do with like cell phone privacy and cell tower privacy and stuff like that. And there was a court case that made some progress. We still need to make more progress at the state level on this particular issue. And privacy is of the utmost concern in today's society, where we're all, basically carrying around devices that record our entire being. So I think that's really important too. So I mean, those would be my 303 bills that I would like to get done.
All right,
Yeah,
Representative Zika.
the affordable housing, of course, I'm very passionate about that. So I would really like to see that one go through. Our homelessness, I'd really like to see that one go through, so we could get some really dedicated help here in Central Oregon for our homeless population. And then ladder fuel reduction. That's very important for forest fires, because we are surrounded by them. So I think that's absolutely necessary. Aubrey's in danger, Sister's in danger, Sun River, Shoots River Woods. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So yes, those are my three. Really quick and short there. Sorry.
Okay, I'm wondering what math I'm going to use when I count to 3 here.
Clearly, an
Senate
education
math?
bill is needed.
Yeah, Senate math or representative math?
Well, I already got those bills done, so you can pick 3 new ones.
There you go.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Well,
Yeah.
oh, that's true.
We all
I
have
get to go
ones.
last.
It's
They're
awesome.
all done. Yeah, my top one really is revenue reform and fully funding education. And so I'm using a little bit of Senate math there and bundling a few bills in that, because I think that's really the work that needs to be done and should be done and has to be done. And so that's why I'm sitting up here, and that's really what I want to accomplish, so that I can retire and go back to gardening. And then mental health reform, I really think that if we could get that bill passed, to have a goal for all of our local regions on how they're going to work together, I think that would be transformative towards mental health and homelessness and a lot of the problems that we struggle with. And also foster care. I have a few bills that I didn't talk much about, but right now, foster care kids, it's taking 18 months for families to be approved to be foster care parents. And by the time they get approved, they're out of the system and their life circumstances have changed. And so we don't have a lot of foster parents. And I have a bill in to change that to be 4 months, so that we could get people approved in a reasonable amount of time and do solid background checks. And also to fully fund CASA. So it's like the foster care bundle. So
You are doing senator math.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's a couple other ones on foster care as well. And so I really think that's one of the things that we should be really embarrassed of as a state, is how we have treated our foster care kids. And I don't want to see foster kids in hotels anymore. And I really want to make sure that we have enough foster parents to be able to do that. And so I'm going to have my foster care bundle for my third one.
Love bundling. That works. Okay, thank you to each of you. I'm going to open it up to the floor. Anybody want to ask the first question? Ken.
Thank you all for your service. I really appreciate it. And Representative Helt, your bill on Oregon State selling property that is shovel-ready for housing is really interesting. Be happy to come testify, help on that in any way, shape, or form. My question is this. In my daily life, in my business life, our biggest challenges have been dealing with Oregon's agencies. In particular, permits that don't have deadlines, where an agency can sit on an application or can punt as long as they want to. And the only way to change that is to sue them. And I'm wondering whether or not it would be reasonable or supportable to have a requirement that any permit, any decision, etc., has a specific deadline. And if it is not done in that deadline, whether or not there should be an attorney's fees, because I'm going to have to sue them, or some other mechanism? Because right now the only way to challenge that is under the Administrative Procedures Act for Oregon.
So is that geared towards all of us or just me because you like my land use, Bill?
I think it's toward all of you.
Okay. I'll just start. So I'd really like to know some more specifics on what type of permits you're talking about. So if it's a general type, every permit should have a deadline, or if it's specific permits that you find that don't have deadlines that need deadlines.
So my largest challenges as a business person have been with, as Senator Knopp knows, Oregon Water Resources Department, and more recently, Dogami.
Okay. Yeah, I think we should talk afterwards and strategize. This is what, we've got unlimited bills until tomorrow, so.
No,
Yeah.
it's till the 18th.
What?
You have till the 18th.
Oh, okay, well, until the 18th. Now I got more time, but I'm in Salem, so you're gonna have to drive over there. So maybe afterwards we can chat.
Anyone else want to address that?
Well, it seems like common sense that you'd want to have some sort of closure at least, even if you got denied. So, yeah, I think there should be something in there to one way or the other. You need to get an answer. So, yeah, I would talk more with you too. So.
Senator?
The good representative used the words common sense. Those words stop about the top of the pass and never really penetrate Ohio Valley, unfortunately. Because it does. I mean, Ken's there and it's like, it seems like common sense. It does. And yet, somehow, the agencies don't like it. Because they don't want to be accountable. You know, they want to be able to just do what they want. And so, I mean, it's a difficult road for things that bring accountability to the system, but I think we'd all be interested in working and supporting something like that.
Thank you. Got another question from the back?
Karna Gustafson. So my question is this: how do we keep, or is there a process to create a bill that keeps everybody's pet project out of the cost to build a house? Whether it be solar readiness, whether it be you have to include a vehicle charging station, whether it's how your stormwater is protected on site. How do we keep everybody's pet project, and I can probably list a lot more, those are probably not the best examples, but we've got wildfire hardening coming at us soon too, which adds $12,000 to the price of a house on average. When we have a affordability problem. So how do we keep everybody's pet projects, whether it's the governor's or the legislators' ideas, out of the cost of building a house?
So, Karna, is it? It's nice to meet you, Karna. The best reminder of what you just described exists right here in Bend. So when I go to the River House, there's this little cabin that sits, you guys have seen this. If you've eaten dinner out on the deck, you've seen this, right? Well, that cabin was built more than 100 years ago and is still standing. And you know what we didn't have then? We didn't have a building department, we didn't have building codes, we didn't have building regulation, and we've layered all this stuff on for health and safety. And everybody has a great idea about how we can improve housing, but it always seems to add cost to the system. And you know, from our land use system to our building code, we have one of the strictest building codes in the country. And the organization, Karna, that you work for, should use the right tense. They actually supported, back in 1972, some of the first building codes. And the reason they did that was to keep fly-by-night builders from coming into the area and just slapping houses together. And so even advocates for affordable housing, like that group that you work for, have in fact embraced things that ultimately do cost a little more. But what we have in this atmosphere is kind of a supercharged, let's kind of do it all, and let's not worry about how much it costs, and so whether it's an extra fee or whatever. And really the only way to do that is to hire people who can say no, because anybody can say yes, right? So it's really hard to say no when people are coming to you and they're passionate about their idea and they want to have something done. And so since we do not control the process, usually the folks who want to add layers of regulation because they believe government does good things for you, and sometimes that's the case, but lots of times it just makes your life more complicated. And so, you know, we really just need people to make the case that although well-intentioned, a lot of this stuff actually is counterproductive and needs to, you know, basically we need to allow the market to work. And if people want those things, I can assure you that builders will build those things. And so, you know, this is about educating people about what you want and letting the market work, as opposed to having government force a solution that just costs everybody more money for products that a lot of people aren't going to want.
Representatives, anything to add to that?
I think the senator said it really well. You shouldn't mandate people for choices that you're going to make, like solar panels, electric car charging stations. These are choices that we make as consumers. So we shouldn't be forced into having these in our homes. And Karna's right, it increases the cost of the house. So if you're looking for affordable housing, but you're going to tell me, oh, but you have to wire for solar panels and you have to have a charging station in the garage, then it's adding costs. It's a whole lot different than when you say, hey, you need a firewall in between the garage and the house. That makes sense because it's safety. If a fire starts in one area, you don't want it to go in the house. So those are different. So I think we need to hold that and say what are choices and what are safety.
I think we need more tenacious lawyers watching out for our best interests and making sure that they're brought to our awareness, and that we make sure we inform legislators that these really are not things that are helping us, because we need to focus more on affordable housing. And affordable housing starts with regulations, and we've got to make sure that the regulations we're putting in are reasonable and just, and not just driving cost up. And so I thank you for your hard work and your wisdom and keeping us all informed and making sure that we're able to try and keep our cost of living down.
Thank you. And another question from this side of the room.
Thank you all very much for your service and all the hard work you're going to be doing and all the hours and road trips back and forth from Salem. So really appreciate the fact that you're willing to sacrifice a great portion of your lives and your families to represent us. My name's Kyle Frick. I'm a past board member of the chamber, and I had two things that I didn't hear anything on, so I'll let you just have your choice. But healthcare, Medicaid, Medicare, there's a lot of revenue and expense around that. And then marijuana is a huge issue here in Central Oregon, and just wondering which direction you think that's going, or if you have any thoughts on that.
I'm going to take the marijuana one. I'm going to be putting forward a legislative concept to invest some of the tax dollars that come from the marijuana sales into prevention, youth prevention specialists to be housed in our ESDs, to make sure that we're helping our youth through this transitional state, because I think that this has really impacted our young people, and we need to help educate them and have people to do so. And we don't have enough at this point, and that was always supposed to be part of it, was that it was going to go into education, but I just don't think that it's getting to where we need it to in education. So thanks for your question, Kyle.
Yeah, I agree with Cheri there. We do need help. I have 2 small children, so the marijuana issue with me is very, it hits home. I don't want them to grow up and have this. I voted no on it, but I do recognize that there are some medicinal uses for it. But when I've been going to these tours of schools, and it's becoming a problem. So the superintendent over in Redmond has said it's becoming an issue with our best and brightest students even, that they're becoming expelled or suspended. So we really need to take a hard look at it and make sure that we get some behavioral counselors in our school and see if we can try to curb this before it gets any worse. I like Cheri's idea a lot too, so I think I would be very willing to get on that with you.
Are you signing on my bill?
I think I might be.
Okay, cool.
Thank you. Senator.
Yeah, I hate to disappoint you, Kyle, but I'm going to go with marijuana as well. We're going to leave healthcare, I guess, on its own. But you've all heard the adage, be careful what you wish for. You just might get it. Well, Oregon got it, and we grow 7 times more marijuana than the entire population of Oregon can smoke and or consume, and that is a problem. And what's happened is that there are very few people who are making money, and so now they want to sell across state lines, currently illegal. And I don't think the current administration is likely to relax those rules. And so we have a big problem in front of us. The representatives have already talked about the issue that probably is the most important to all of us, which is keeping marijuana out of the hands of kids. Because with their developing brains, there's pretty good evidence that they can have a significant, long-lasting effect, negative impact on their growth in that area. And so I think you're going to continue to see thoughtful legislation that is trying to do the best we can to implement what the people of Oregon wanted, while at the same time protecting those who are most vulnerable from its use. And literally it is everywhere. So, and then on the good news side, its cousin hemp. We've done a lot to get hemp going. And so, and for those of you who aren't familiar with the cousin, it does not have the THC in it, so it cannot get you high. And occasionally there are people who can't tell the difference, and so they will try to rob the hemp farm. Doesn't always go so well. So I don't know if we need more signs or I don't know what, but we actually have made a lot of progress because hemp was pretty much outlawed for because of the timber industry for a lot of years, and there's actually some really good things you can do with hemp. And so that's actually a positive thing that has sort of come out of this whole movement, but we still have a long way to go in the best way to regulate marijuana as a product. And so you'll continue to see legislation session after session until we get better to where we need to be on that issue. And so it's really important for the public to speak up and give us as much input as they can on that. And hopefully we will make some progress on the issue in the coming session.
Thank you. We have one more question here in the middle.
Thank you, Katie. Laura Handy, Heart of Oregon Corps, and I'm here representing our Central Oregon youth who are both traditional and non-traditional young people. And I'm wanting to get your comments on the emerging workforce and out-of-school youth activities within the Higher Education Coordinating Council, whether that's GED wraparound services grants or the Oregon Youth Conservation Corps, or whether that's activities like the Workforce Investment Boards and the WIOA Youth Services grants that really help support young people that need job skills training, alternative paths to education, opportunities to learn job skills and interface in internships with local businesses, which is something the Chamber here has invested heavily in with our internship coordinators and our Youth Career Connect system. What would you tell our young people? And I've asked Jen to record so I can report this back directly to our youth. You know, what are you doing at the state level to assist young people, especially in the face of the silver tsunami? Everyone is retiring ultimately within the next 5 to 10 years, it seems like, and yet our young people are unprepared for the workplace, and our employers can't find enough young people that are qualified for their jobs. So do you have anything on the dockets? How can we make sure that these issues continue to receive attention from the Central Oregon perspective? Thank you.
Here's what I would tell you, Laura, is that I spent 5 weeks over this past year traveling the state of Oregon with the Joint Student Success Committee, and I was in literally dozens of school buildings and high schools, and I tell this story as much as I can. And so we always take these tours, and in every high school you see these boards, and I call them proud boards. And they're boards that have universities' names and then the names of kids who are going to those universities on them. And as I walked through there, I thought to myself, you know, 2/3 of these kids are not going to go to a university. And so if they're not going to go to OSU's Cascades, just a little plug for OSU Cascades, they are, because it took us literally 45 minutes to utter the words OSU Cascades tonight, and so I feel like we need to do it just a couple more times. I'd ask whoever was leading the tour, where's the board for the trade schools? Where's the board for the truck driving? The kids are going to truck driving school, that are going to welding. The average age of a plumber and electrician is 56 years old. We need those people. Otherwise, we have big problems. We need men and women to be trained to be electricians and plumbers, and they make really good wages. As a matter of fact, they usually make more than people who have a 4-year degree, and usually they have almost no debt. I would say those are some pretty smart choices. And so to the kids who want to do that, I said, why are we not putting their names up on the boards too? And at every school, you could just tell that they were super disappointed that they had blown it. Because in fact, we are proud of those kids, and they need their own proud boards. And so I got commitments from a lot of those people that we're gonna put proud boards up for all the kids that are going to technical school, and all the things that you can do working with your hands, whether that's hairdresser, welder, plumber, pipe fitter, electrician, obviously carpentry. So whatever that is that you want to do, what we really need to do is be treating kids as individuals as opposed to institutionalizing them in schools and treating them like numbers. We need to treat them like people and help them find their passion in education and then in a career and direct them toward that, and that costs money. And so we need to fully fund career technical education, and we need to continue to invest in that, because what happens during downturns is that those programs went away, and we need to continue to invest in those and stay invested in those, because kids who are involved in CTE graduate at 15% or higher rates than do their counterparts who are not involved in a CTE program. And so thank you for what you do and for the commitment that you have made to work with our kids that are non-traditional learners and who are going to be going out and earning a great living. So put the proud boards up at all the high schools across the state, and let's be proud of those kids too, because I know we all are as parents.
You want to go, Jack, or you want me to?
Go ahead.
Okay. So what I want to say to the kids is be proud and find your path and do it, because it's a great career and it's awesome. We need more people to do it, and I've been a big champion of Measure 98. I campaigned for that measure, and I want to make sure we fully fund that measure. We need options for kids. When we talk about graduation rates, this is really the crux of what we're talking about. When we don't have options for our students to meet them where they are and meet them where they want to go, we lose them. And so we're talking a lot about these students that get lost because they don't have things that inspire them, and they're not going to be, working with paper and pencil. They want to work with their hands, and they should be supported and they should be celebrated, and we should have many options for them. My son is one of those kids. He's working on his welding certificate up at COCC, and there's a lot of really great jobs, and they're living wage jobs, and that's what we want for our kids. We want them not only to graduate, that's not really the goal. The goal is to have them have living wage jobs, right, after they're done. And so I'm a huge proponent of this and a champion of this, and I think that it's really important. I was out at J Bar J, and the next day I think they were breaking ground for their CTE program, and the kids were super excited about it, and it's like Tim was saying, it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's something to be very proud of. So they should, find their path, and we should be supporting them as adults and making sure that we do that, because the world stops really fast when you don't have a plumber. Trust me, I own a restaurant. And the electricians as well, and it's great investment, and it's something that we need to do, and kids are excited about it. We just have to get them the right support and path and options to make sure that they know that those careers are there and move them forward. And of course, as long as they're not going to OSU Cascades, because I don't think I've said it enough either. I think I want to change my answer for the bundle. In my beginning bundle where I fund education and cost containment, I want to add funding for OSU Cascades in there.
All right, it was your first time. You're new. We're going to let you do it.
All right.
Do we get to take those wands to Salem? Is that,
Yeah.
is
Yes.
that how that works? Awesome.
The wands are yours.
Yes.
Representative Zika, did you have anything to add?
Well, I mean, they just unloaded a lot of policy on you, and of course I agree with them on CTE credits and Measure 98, college prepared and everything like that, but if you were still recording, I would tell them that the world is your oyster. Stay in school, take things that you're passionate about, and you can be anything that you want to be, and you can do it.
Well, we have run out of time. I want to thank each of you, Senator Knopp and Representative Zika and Helt. Thank you. Take a deep breath. Get some sleep. We'll be thinking of you in the next several months, and thank you so much for your service. To those of you who are here tonight, the Ben Chamber is highly active in the legislative session. If you are interested in getting involved and adding your voice, please let me know. We'd welcome you to the fold. And I want to remind you, February 5th is the next What's Brewing. It's on the survey results of a community value survey about what do we do about growth, how do we feel, what do we think that should look like, what do we value as a community as we struggle with the growth and the housing, transportation, and related issues that go along with that. And I hope you all can come to that. Thank you again for coming tonight, and one last round of applause for our representatives.